Lee Kuan Yew never warned societies by predicting catastrophe. He warned them by describing momentum. Decline, in his vocabulary, was not collapse into chaos. It was the slow loss of discipline, relevance, and competitive edge, hidden beneath continued wealth, institutional order, and moral self-confidence. If he were to warn that Canada's decline is becoming inevitable, he would not be forecasting disorder. He would be describing a trajectory that, unless deliberately reversed, narrows the country's future while preserving the illusion of success. He would begin by acknowledging what Canadians rightly value. Canada is stable, peaceful, and well-governed. Its institutions function. Its society is broadly cohesive. It is admired internationally for moderation, fairness, and decency. These are strengths. Lee respected them. But he would ask the question he asked of all comfortable societies. Are these strengths being converted into capability, or are they being used to excuse underperformance? In Lee's framework, decline begins when a country confuses moral capital with strategic capital. Moral capital earns admiration. Strategic capital earns leverage. Admiration is pleasant. Leverage is necessary. Canada, he would argue, has accumulated moral capital while allowing strategic capital to erode, quietly, steadily, and with little resistance because the costs are not immediately felt. He believed that geography can be both a gift and a trap. Canada's proximity to a powerful neighbor, its vast resources, and its distance from many global flashpoints have created a sense of insulation. Insulation weakens urgency. Urgency is the engine of reform. Without it, political systems drift toward preserving comfort rather than sharpening performance. Over time, incentives reward distribution over productivity, consensus over execution, and stability over transformation. Canada's economy, in Lee's analysis, would be central to this warning. Resource wealth and population growth have inflated aggregate output while masking weak productivity growth. When income arrives through favorable terms of trade rather than relentless efficiency, productivity becomes optional. Firms tolerate mediocrity, capital hesitates, innovation diffuses. The economy grows larger without becoming more capable. Lee was relentless about per capita performance because it strips away illusion. Aggregate GDP can rise while per worker output stagnates. Population growth can make an economy look dynamic while wages lag and opportunity narrows. On this measure, he would say, Canada's warning lights are flashing. The country is adding people faster than it is adding capability. That imbalance always ends the same way: pressure on housing, infrastructure, services, and social trust. He would be unsparing about housing because housing is where abstract policy failures become personal. When a society prices its younger generations out of stability, it signals that the future is closed. High housing costs, combined with modest productivity growth, compress mobility. People work harder for less progress. When effort no longer yields advancement, loyalty erodes, not loudly, but rationally. Lee would also point to Canada's approach to growth. Growth is discussed as something to be managed rather than engineered. Debates focus on fairness and distribution, assuming growth will continue. When growth slows, distribution becomes zero-sum. Zero-sum politics polarizes societies and paralyzes reform. Lee believed advanced democracies often decline politically before they decline economically, through gridlock rather than collapse. He would argue that Canada's regulatory environment reflects past conditions rather than future needs. Rules designed for a slower, less competitive world now inhibit adaptability. Compliance costs weigh heavily on small and scaling firms. Risk-taking is discouraged structurally, even when celebrated rhetorically. The result is an economy that trains talent but struggles to deploy it at scale. Talent, in Lee's thinking, is the decisive resource of the modern era. Canada educates well and attracts people from around the world. But attraction is not retention, and retention is not utilization. Opportunity density matters more than headcount. When skilled people cannot find pathways to scale ambition domestically, they look elsewhere. This is not failure of values, it is failure of systems. Lee would warn that relying on immigration to compensate for weak productivity is a dangerous substitution. Immigration can raise population and soften labor shortages, but it cannot replace the need to increase output per worker. If newcomers encounter the same constraints, high housing costs, limited scale, slow career progression, they too will become mobile. Numbers rise, capability does not. Social tension follows. He would also challenge Canada's reliance on reputation and alliances. Alliances are valuable, but they are strongest when partners are indispensable. Indispensability is earned through capability. Values attract goodwill. Capability attracts consultation. Canada is often praised for moderation, but praise does not secure influence when competition intensifies. Lee would describe this as strategic complacency. Security is assumed. Markets are assumed. Stability is assumed. Assumptions delay preparation. When the external environment hardens, adjustment becomes expensive and politically painful. Countries that prepare early adapt quietly. Countries that wait adapt under duress. Another accelerant of inevitability, in his view, is short political time horizons. Democracies respond to voters. Voters reward stability. Leaders proposing deep reform face backlash. Leaders preserving comfort survive. Over time, leadership becomes managerial rather than strategic. Management maintains systems. It does not renew them. Lee believed leadership exists to confront reality before it becomes unavoidable. He would argue that Canada's leadership class is constrained by incentives that punish foresight. Proposing productivity-enhancing reform offends comfort. Delaying reform preserves calm. Calm, however, is not competitiveness. He would also warn about national narratives. When societies explain shortcomings as the product of global forces rather than domestic choices, agency erodes. Canada often frames challenges as imported: global inflation, global volatility, global competition. Lee would say that global pressures expose weaknesses. They do not create them. The response must be internal. In his analysis, decline is relative. Canada may remain peaceful, prosperous, and admired, but others will move faster. Capital will seek higher returns elsewhere. Innovation will concentrate in denser ecosystems. Influence will shrink. Remaining comfortable is not the same as remaining relevant. Relevance determines leverage. Leverage determines choice. Lee would emphasize that decline does not require failure of values. Canada's values may remain intact. Institutions may still function. Elections will still be held. That is precisely why decline is misunderstood. The system will work, just not well enough to keep pace. Collapse, as he defined it, is not disorder. It is mediocrity at scale. He would also point to generational consequences. Younger Canadians face slower mobility and higher barriers to stability. When upward mobility stalls, trust erodes. Erosion of trust undermines cohesion. Cohesion loss weakens governance. The loop tightens quietly. Lee would insist that inevitability does not mean fate. It means momentum. Momentum continues until countered by deliberate force. Canada's momentum, unless redirected, points toward relative decline because its incentives reward comfort over competitiveness and consensus over execution. He would conclude without drama, no accusation, no alarmism. He would simply observe that history does not punish countries for lacking virtue. It punishes them for being slow. Canada's decline is becoming inevitable only if it continues to believe that success will protect it from consequence. If nothing changes, decline will not arrive with noise. It will arrive with confidence. Confidence that everything is fine, that adjustments can wait, that tomorrow will resemble yesterday. And by the time that confidence cracks, the cost of reversing course will be far higher than anyone expected. That, Lee Kuan Yew would warn, is how prosperous democracies fall behind, not with collapse, but with calm.